Today on Digital PR Explained, I'm joined by Natalia Buia, the founder of Gold Candor PR. Before starting her own boutique agency, Natalia spent over a decade as a journalist, working in some of Canada's top newsrooms, and that experience gave her a sharp understanding of what truly makes a story newsworthy, and of course, how to write pitches that actually get noticed. And in this episode, I've brought Natalia on to discuss one of her proudest wins, and that's landing her client a feature on CNN's Anderson Cooper 360. Welcome to the podcast, Natalia, and congratulations.
Thank you so much, Britt. It's a pleasure to be here. Your podcast is very informative for PR professionals like myself, and I'm just happy to contribute some words of wisdom today.
Oh my gosh, no, thank you for being here, Natalia. I'm just jazzed because I'll mention this again soon, but the CNN placement that you got, it was just to get right into it. It was for your client, DeepMedia. They're a company that has built technology to detect deep fakes. Very timely. And the CEO in this segment on CNN's Anderson Cooper 360, the CEO walks through the interviewer the technology that they've built. And it's one of those placements that PRs dream of. I'll link to the segment in the show notes so listeners can check it out and watch the whole segment itself and see just how cool it is from just a personal perspective. It's fascinating just to see how this technology works and the crazy stuff that's out there from a deepfake perspective. But going back to digital PR and how it all came to be, because I could go into so many different directions here. Can you walk us through the process of how this wonderful segment came to be?
Okay, picture this. July 2023 was when AC360 finally ran the segment. I believe the headline was something like, "Tech expert shows how deepfake images could inspire real world panic." The CNN correspondent, Donny O'Sullivan, who normally reports on things to do with technology, or sometimes he works on political stories. He joined the DeepMedia CEO, Rijal Gupta, in their headquarters in Oakland, California. And this was at a time when there's a bit of a newsjacking element to the story, because this was around the time there was, if you remember, there was this deep fake image that went viral of an explosion at the Pentagon. Obviously, that didn't happen because we know that building is safe and sound. But at that time, I kind of piggybacked off of that viral photo and reached out to various outlets to just talk about ways that people, news organizations can detect deep fakes, especially because remember, it's 2023. The US presidential election was, a year away. So there was a lot of momentum building up. Not just from a political standpoint, but also how deepfakes can just impact everybody, society in general, right? So it took a lot of work, and I think I was just monitoring media outlets, and I noticed that CNN was one that was ramping up their coverage on AI and deepfakes. AI is still a hot topic right now, of course. I don't think that's going to ever die down. But just given where things were at from a political perspective, I just felt like it was the right story, the right outlet, and the right audience all at the right time. So it was, call it a stroke of luck, call it perfect timing, call it whatever you want. But for me, everything collided perfectly for this one particular story.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I remember that time. It was scary. And so you mentioned that you were pitching a few publications then, and this wasn't a question I prepared for you previously. So this is one of those that aren't on the script,
All
but
good. Go right
I
ahead.
was I was curious, how can you say more about your process? Like how many did you pitch this story to, if you don't mind sharing? And how do you, that's a delicate balance, right? Because I
Absolutely.
mean, publications do, especially I'd imagine like and AC360, they do want a bit of like exclusivity and
Mhm.
the
Yeah.
ability to share this when it hasn't been shared before. So
Yeah.
say more about that process.
Yeah, I mean, as somebody in PR, I use a lot of resources at my disposal, especially for, monitoring certain topics, and just doing my own due diligence. I hate saying that word.
It's a tricky
But I had
one.
to do a lot of my own monitoring and research to see, okay, what outlets are the most appropriate to be pitching, a story on an AI expert, sharing insights on how to detect a deep fake image, video, audio file, what have you. And as I said, I did notice CNN was starting to ramp up their coverage in terms of talking about AI and deep fakes. I mean, they obviously reported about the Pentagon deep fake. So I noticed Donny O'Sullivan got his contact info. And this was, I want to say, back in March. I was in contact with Donny and then his producer for AC360, Yaya. Um, at first, there was a lot of back and forth emails between his team, who are obviously based in New York, and then Deep Media, my client at the time, they're in Oakland, California. So San Francisco Bay Area, if you will. And so eventually they agreed to come down, visit the team in person, and do an interview at their headquarters. They were aiming for, I think, sometime in May. And then because it took 2 months, the team had to take all the footage, package it together. And of course, you can see in the segment, they also spoke with other companies in the AI space as well. So it wasn't just an exclusive story on Deep Media, but at the same time, that wasn't an issue for us. It's just we're honored to be included, right?
Hmm.
And I think that's what something a lot of founders and a lot of companies kind of need to, take into consideration is that, of course, everyone loves their own feature. They want their own spread in a magazine, but sometimes that's just not happening. And you have to kind of be okay um, with accepting, being included in a roundup, if you will. It's still, no matter what type of coverage you get, it's still coverage that's going to help you attract the right audience, right? Um, so because I reached out to them in March or early April, I believe they finally went down and shot an interview in May. It didn't air until July, so you can imagine that there's a lot of back and forth. And this particular media win taught me so much about patience because PR is a slow burn and you can't really rush anything, no matter how eager you are for something to air or get published. I can understand the excitement and the eagerness of it all, but at the end, um, when that time comes, it'll be worth it if you're just patient, right?
Oh my gosh. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and you know, knowing when to send a follow-up email or a gentle nudge, if someone's not being responsive, and then knowing when to trust the process and trust that that team has everything under control. I've done everything on my end, right? I've introduced them to the right experts. I've sent them all the necessary information, the stats, additional B-roll of the company, that sort of a thing. So sometimes, you have to know when to sort of take a seat back and trust the process and trust that they're doing everything. They're doing the work. So it's out of our hands. We just have to be patient.
Let's talk a little bit more about the pitch. I mean, CNN, this team, they receive thousands of pitches. maybe even a day. Okay, maybe I'm exaggerating a bit, but they receive a lot of pitches. And I'm curious to know what aspects of the pitch or what do you think made your pitch stand out to them specifically?
Well, I kept the email subject line very simple and very short. I don't like to bombard anybody with a long-winded email. No one has time to read it. And me being a journalist, I know what it's like on the other end, right? So I always keep that in mind. So I kept things very simple and short. AI was a trending topic at the time. It still is. But in 2023, deepfakes were heavily reported on. So more so than now, because a lot of people were still trying to figure out how deepfake detection works, its accuracy, things like that. And so I reached out to Doni. My subject line had something to do with AI expert on accurate deepfake detection, something like that. Very simple, right? Very straightforward, eye-catching. And I wrote in the pitch, tied it back to the viral Pentagon deepfake that was just coming out in the press. And I said, I'd love to introduce you to an expert. This is a guy who started a company in California that can detect deepfakes with 99% accuracy. When there's been a lot of other startups in the deepfake detection space, but none of them have that close to perfection accuracy rate. So that's kind of what I think helped the CEO stand out. And that's basically it. Just a very short pitch about, given the fact that there are so many deepfakes swirling social media right now, it's the right opportunity to have an expert on and walk you through how deepfake detection works and how newsrooms can benefit from this type of technology. Even celebrities and just average people can all benefit from learning about deepfake detection.
Oh my gosh, yeah, for sure. I mean, okay, so credibility went a long way for that. The accuracy component, I mean, that's something that makes Deep Media stand out from their competitors for sure. So let's talk a little bit about, I want to skip real fast to that interview that the CEO had with the correspondent at CNN. So, how did you prepare the CEO for this moment? Did you have any media training?
Okay, so I just want to say that I really lucked out with Deep Media here. As a client, they were the perfect client anyone could ever ask for. And listen, I'm not really heavily involved in the tech industry. My background as a journalist was lifestyle and local news. So I don't necessarily have a background in technology, but having worked with them for so long, I certainly did learn a lot about AI and deepfakes specifically. And Rijal Gupta, he is, you know, I'm lucky that he is someone that doesn't need a lot of media training. He speaks at a lot of conferences. He goes on podcasts even before we started working together. He's a very intelligent, articulate, personable man, and one of those people that, the camera loves. So he didn't necessarily need a lot of media training. However, what I did was I just prepared a lot of talking points for him, just based on this doesn't always happen, but sometimes the producer will send you a couple questions in advance.
Love
So
that.
expert's not, blindsided by anything. It doesn't
Hmm.
always happen. Not everyone does this, but it's always nice when that is provided to you. I just walked him through a couple of those points. And I really, wanted him to focus more on because there are a lot of deepfake detection companies around, but what makes Deep Media stand out above everybody else? And that's really what I told him to, I really want that to come across.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, important. Yeah, because like you said, that's what sold the whole pitch.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's dig in a bit to the behind the scenes components because what you did behind the scenes is so important and it's something that isn't reflected when you watch the segment, right? Like not nobody watching the segment thinks about besides PRs, like what went into this to make it happen. And I want to know, can you share more about the prep work? You mentioned B-roll that you shared with the producers. What other information and elements did you have to plan for and provide to make this happen that you think is worth pointing out?
Because this is a broadcast segment and not a print piece, there are elements that you try your best to provide. For instance, a lot of B-roll. So obviously, when the CNN team, so it was the producer, yeah, Doni, the reporter, and you can imagine a couple camera people
Mm-hmm.
and maybe one audio guy. They certainly take footage on location of the CEO at his desk on the computer, maybe walking around the place, things like that. But once that team left and went back to their CNN office and were producing the piece, putting it together, it in the editing bay, of course, they come across um, a need for something else. So I remember Yaya emailing me about, I think he wanted some type of, he wanted other examples of Deep Media's software doing the whole detection thing. So wanting screenshots and screen recordings of their technology, kind of taking a couple other deepfake examples and seeing how they come up with that 99% accuracy. I remember having to send him that. Again, that didn't make it to air. And a lot of the times when you do work with TV stations, they do often ask for a lot of things that just end up on the cutting room floor. But I think it's better to give them too much than not enough. And so even if maybe someone doesn't ask you, whether it's a TV reporter or if it's a print journalist, I would recommend sending them as much information or assets as you possibly can. They might not use it, but it looks good on you to say, like, hey, I have all this stuff, I have all this information at your disposal, right? It just
Mm-hmm.
makes you look good. It makes you look prepared and very organized.
Right, because the last thing you want is for the producer to keep coming back to you with
Yeah,
requests because you want to make their job easier, as easy
exactly.
as possible.
Exactly.
Okay, okay, that's very good to know. You mentioned earlier in the conversation about the art of the follow up. And again, just to remind listeners, this pitch went out in March or April, and
Mhm.
the segment didn't publish, or sorry, not publish. The segment didn't go live until July, so months later. Can you tell us more about what you learned about, or what you know about follow ups, and how you approached doing that in this situation?
I would say, having been a journalist myself before I made the switch over to public relations, I learned a lot about what to do and what not to do, right? Because for me as a journalist, I got a lot of emails that I'm like, oh God, like, why is it written this way? Or, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And so I made a commitment to myself. I'm like, okay, I'm not going to be one of those people when
Mm-hmm.
I'm on the other end. So I would say, uh, you know, keep your initial pitch very short and sweet. Don't make it so fluffy. Make it more focused on stats or tie it to a certain current event. something like that. And sending one email is never enough. You know, sometimes you have to nurture that relationship. You have to follow up sporadically, but don't like bombard the reporter with too many emails because then they'll start to pull away and they'll ignore you. It's kind of like dating, okay? Like if you can believe the analogy. Right? Like you don't want to be texting someone 6 texts in a row. You don't want to be
Mm-hmm.
that double texter. You know, if you don't hear from them in a couple days, I like to go maybe like 5 business days. I'm okay. If I haven't heard back, this is when I'm going to follow up. Some people follow up in less than 24 hours, which is like the biggest no-no in PR, right? So you have to be smart, useful, but also chill. Okay. So it's
Mm-hmm.
like I said, again, it's a lot like dating. And, so I had a second follow up, and then that's when Yaya reached out to me, and things were starting to brew. And of course, it takes time to kind of for them to sort of confirm a good date to come down and film the interview. I remember having to do a lot of follow ups after the interview was filmed because,
Mm-hmm.
like I said, we were also eager for this to come together and to air on AC360. Um, I remember in June, you know, they hit us back with, okay, this is going to air early July, but then early July came and they're like, they kept pushing it back just due to other pressing news that just
Mm-hmm.
took more of a priority.
Right.
They kept pushing the air date, they pushed it back twice.
Okay.
Which is fine. It happens, right? And you just really, like I said earlier, you have to be patient because in the end, everything will be worth it. So you can't panic.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Don't lose your
and I
cool.
think, yeah, my follow-ups were just like, hey, just want to make sure everything's good on your end.
Mm-hmm.
Can I provide you with anything else while you're working on this piece? That's really it. Like, you don't want to bombard them with, okay, when's it going to air? What, hurry up.
Yeah.
You
No,
have
for
to,
sure.
instead of doing all of that and being frantic, try and come off as more like useful and handy to this person, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
hey, you're working on this story. Amazing. What else can I do for you to make your life easier? Right.
Yeah,
I think
definitely.
that's the best way to go when you're doing any type of follow up or when you're trying to nudge them to kind of get the answers that you need.
So what were you saying to your client? I think that's also very hard and a
Yeah.
difficult
Yeah.
balance to
Um,
strike.
I've had some clients that have been very like pushy and overly eager for certain press pieces to come out. I think a good PR professional manages expectations very well and kind of, I understand. I think if I were being interviewed, if I was a CEO of a big company and I'm being interviewed and I'm telling my family, oh, I'm going to be on CNN soon. Yeah, of course I'm going to be excited. I'm going to be anxious, eager for it to come out. But um, luckily with DeepMedia, I think the whole team was just very chill. And they're also so busy too. Like they actually have full-time jobs. They work like
Yeah.
60 hours a week. Like they have important things to do. So they weren't actually like sitting at home dwindling, their fingers.
Mm-hmm.
So time just went by really fast, actually.
Right.
Like
Okay.
it would seem that it was such a long time for stuff to come together, but 3 months goes by really, really fast when you have other important work to do. And of course, there were other media outlets that Deep Media spoke with during that time to kind of act as a buffer, if you will, because this was the pièce de résistance. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So luckily, this particular client was really great at just being patient and letting things play out.
That's wonderful. It's so nice when clients understand. And Natalia, I think what you mentioned too, about the clients being busy and, the pressure that a PR might feel is sometimes pressure that isn't even realistic. It's just the pressure that we produce on our own. And it's like, a double-edged sword, right? Like
Mm.
you have the pressure. You create these pressures in your head as a PR because you want these wins. Like these are what we live for as a PR, right? Um, but I think it's so important to keep in mind that clients understand that these things take time if you educate them correctly.
Yes.
And sometimes these are just mental hurdles that you have to overcome, not sometimes, most of the time, in order to keep moving forward. You know, you got to remember this part of the process is out of your control. If
Hmm.
you've done everything you could to make the interview happen, prepare the client so that it was a success and they have everything that they need, once that has happened, and assuming you're following up like correctly with keeping in mind the advice that you gave, casually being someone who's helpful and not annoying about it, that the rest is out of your control in theory.
Wow.
And you've done your job. So I like to keep that in mind personally. So I thought it was worth highlighting right now
Thank you.
for listeners
There's
who
a
might be listening.
thank you for saying that, by the way, Brett. There is a quote. I don't know where, I don't know who said this first, but I think I read it somewhere on LinkedIn. Someone just said, this is PR, not the ER.
Mm,
And
mhm.
it has always stuck with me because that's so true, isn't it? We're not in the emergency room having to quickly stitch someone up in 5 minutes or they're going to die. No one's going to die here. Okay. And I think that's a good reminder for when you are experiencing those anxious moments where you
Mm,
feel like, okay, I need to do this. This has to happen now. We got to get this done. Just remind yourself that this is PR, not the ER, and to just take a step back and relax. Everything will work out in the end.
Go touch grass, take a breather.
Exactly.
All right, Natalia. Well, gosh, this has been a very fun and enlightening conversation. It's really cool to just talk to somebody who's gotten such a fantastic placement. Is there anything else that we didn't touch on that you think is important before we close out our conversation?
Say that for my career, and I'm pretty sure, my client Deep Media would also say that this was probably the biggest uh, press piece that they've gotten. And it's kind of it's like you've climbed Mount Everest. Okay, so then it's like, okay, what am I gonna do? Like climb this like chumpy mountain next? It's hard to kind of think about, okay, where do we go from here? Because we were basically at the top, right? But it goes back to your whole podcast, and you've had other people come on and talk about the importance of, small media outlets that are also as just as impactful as something like CNN. And I would say that no outlet is insignificant, no matter its viewership or readership. A media win is a win, right? And so um, sure, you've landed coverage on something like Wall Street Journal or New York Times or CNN, but it's also just as important to celebrate the other wins as well.
Amen. I love that. Yeah. So important and exactly what I hope to hit home in almost every episode that we do because it is all important. I agree wholeheartedly. Thank
Yeah.
you so much, Natalia. It's been so fun. Where can my listeners find you and follow along with all of your brilliance?
Um, Thank you for saying that. I'm all over social media. I have the same handle for everything, which is at It's Booyah. And if anyone's interested in connecting with me, of course, there's my website, goldhanderpr.com. My inbox is always open. I actually love getting emails, so bring them.
For those listening, how do you spell the your profile on these social media platforms? Just so they know and so they don't have to go to the show notes if they don't want to.
The at sign ITSBOOYEAH, because that's how you basically pronounce my last name, and that's how I came up with that moniker. Is it's Booyah. That's how you say it.
I think you have the coolest last name of everybody, of
Thank you
anyone
so
I ever interviewed. I'm so
much.
jealous. Thank you so much again, Natalia. This has been wonderful.
Thank you, Britt. Thank you so much. Have a great day.